So we're going to learn how to do a grid system in one-point perspective. Before I begin on that tutorial, I wanted to do a quick review on part one of this assignment where you were picking out a photo reference to work from and how to simplify that room. So you can see in this image, I have my vanishing point right here. I've outlined a rectangle to show where the back of that wall is. Then we can clearly see defined the ceiling, the left wall, the bottom floor, and the right wall. So I want to show you how you can experiment and kind of play around with the shape and the size of your room just by simply moving where your vanishing point is and moving where kind of that back rectangle of the wall goes. So we've got kind of a simple one right here with a larger rectangular wall. We have kind of even amounts of space as far as the ceiling and the floor, and then same with the left wall and the right wall. So we're not getting as much depth with this, but it's great if you have a lot of details on your walls, anything like that. So here's another example where I've moved my vanishing point up to the top left corner, so right here. I've kind of shortened the height on this rectangle so it's a little bit more squashed, and then we're seeing a lot more of that bottom floor and a lot more of the right floor and a little bit less of the ceiling and the left wall. So this would be great if I have, maybe I've got a living room set over here or a big kitchen and an island, so it gives me lots of room to play and place objects over here. Got a slightly different one where again I'm just kind of shortening the width of this rectangle, so I'm getting a lot more floor space. So this would be great. Maybe you want to put a big pool down here. Maybe you've got, I don't know, a pool table, ice hockey table. So you'd have a lot of space to put objects kind of in this floor here. Okay, so these next ones will start to get a little bit trickier. They're getting a little bit more advanced. But I'm starting off with the same principle. So I'm finding my vanishing point, and then instead of squashing the width of my rectangle, the length, I'm bringing in the left and the right sides closer. So I'm squashing width-wise. So I got a really tall rectangle. Okay. So you can imagine if this wasn't here, these projection lines would just extend out this way. So you would see very little of this floor and the ceiling. We see a little bit of the right wall, and then we see quite a bit of the left wall, and it's just kind of zoomed in. And then what I've done is just kind of stopped the projection line right here and then dragged it across horizontal line. So that helped me make kind of the corner of this room. So you can see the floor extending out this way, and this almost kind of creates a little hallway, which is pretty cool. So I could have a door back here, maybe a secret entrance, like with a bookcase. There's lots of different things that I could place in there. Maybe I've got family photos on the wall or something like that. And then last one is probably the most complex, and this is just to show you from beginning to end how creative you can get with this. So again, I'm starting exactly the same way. I found my vanishing point, which would be right here. And then I have that rectangular back wall, so just imagine that it's just a rectangle. And then I'm extending out my projection lines, like so. And what we're noticing that's different with this room is that we do not see the ceiling. Okay, so we're only seeing the floor and the walls. Okay, so what I've done over here is I've done kind of another little hallway. So I've stopped my projection line right here. I've given this a little bit of width, so think about this just like a really tall, flat, rectangular cube. Okay, and that's one thing I want you to remember as you're working on this project is that walls, furniture, those all have mass. They have a substantial weight to them, which would also mean that they have thickness. So if you're drawing a table or a wall or something like that, it's not just going to be one line. It has to have thickness to it. Okay, so it's not paper thin. Give it some substance. Give it some oomph. Okay, and then I've got my other projection line. On this side of the hallway, we can see this line goes all the way back to my vanishing point. So So you should see all those diagonals that go back to that vanishing point. And then similar to this one, I've just flipped it and created a corner. So I could have maybe a staircase in this hallway. Maybe it's a hallway to another bedroom. I could have doors in here. And then for the back part of this wall, I decided to just cut it out. So that video about adding and subtracting onto forms will really help you with creating stuff like this. So essentially I just have a cube. So imagine something like this, and then I'm just deleting out part of that cube. Okay, so I still have my projection lines going back to that vanishing point. They're all going in the correct direction. And again, I'm giving this some thickness because it's a wall, it's substantial. And then back behind here, I just have another line that will show kind of where that floor intersects that back wall. So again, it's creating a lot more depth, it's a lot more interesting, and a lot more creative. All right, so to get into it, I wanted to show you this. So you can see over here I've got my page laid out just as if it were a normal piece of paper, so 8.5 by 11 is pretty standard. And for this project, I want you guys to actually draw in a border this time. So, and we use borders in art, especially in regards to like framing it or getting it ready to sell to someone or put up in a gallery. You want to have a little bit of space between the edge of the paper and your artwork, so you could put a mat over that, you could frame it, because those things will kind of take up space. So you want to give yourself a little bit of room so you're not actually framing on top of your original artwork. You don't want to cut anything off. Okay, so this is just a inch border. You can see hopefully those little red lines along here. So it's just an inch. So I've got an inch space all the way around all four sides. Okay. All right. And then just as a reminder, you guys are going to be completing this in pencil. So especially when you're starting to sketch, you want to use your 2H pencils. Draw very, very lightly. Do not draw with a heavy hand because it's going to be impossible to erase those lines. And we're going to have a lot of lines with perspective. So just be careful of that. Draw light like a feather. Okay. And then when you finish this, you can finish it in any way you want. So you can finish it with graphite pencil. If you want to do colored pencil, that's fine. If you want to do pen and ink, if you have markers and you want to color it, if you want to do watercolor and ink, whatever you want, sky's the limit here. But just make sure that you're starting your construction lines, so that's pre-sketch with your 2H pencil. All right, now that that is said and done, out of the way, I'm going to begin by finding where I want my vanishing point. And I'm actually going to just use the corners of this to find the center, and that's where I'm going to put my vanishing point. And this will give me a pretty standard room. The walls of the ceiling and the floor will all be pretty much the same like dimensions. They'll be pretty equal to each other. Okay, so here's our super secret X trick, where just X from the corners to find the center. So this would be my vanishing point right here. And then what I'm going to do is place in where I want my back wall to be. So I'm lining up with those diagonal lines, those projection lines, making sure that each corner is in the right place. And there is my back wall. Okay, and as I go along, I'm going to erase any of the lines that I no longer need. Just what I want you to do with your pencil. So anything that's extraneous, that's extra, get rid of it so it's not going to confuse you. Okay, so theoretically, I'm erasing my pencil lines right here. Just like that. Okay, and then I'm going to keep my vanishing point. So I want to make sure I know where my vanishing point is at all times. If you have lost your vanishing point, or you don't have a vanishing point, you're going to be in big trouble. Okay, because with 1 point perspective, we have 1 point, that we focus on to direct our orthogonal lines or our projection lines, and it has to be at that one point. It can't be anywhere else. And you'll find that if you see your diagonal lines are going in different directions, they're all going to different points, your perspective is going to be really, really off. Okay, so just make sure that you always know where that vanishing point is. All right, so now we're going to get on to the trickier bit of this. And I would kind of suggest doing this beforehand, but what I'm going to do is actually mark in each inch interval. So I'm going to use this when I put in my grid system. So I want to know where these are. I've got all of my measurements marked out, so it's just an inch across. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 inches across this way, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a half. There's like a tiny little half down here, and I'll show you what to do with that. So here comes the fun part, and this gets very tricky. It looks confusing, but you just need to follow my steps. So follow exactly what it is that I'm doing, and hopefully you don't get lost. Okay. So what I'm going to start doing is just picking my bottom right, my first line here. I'm going to begin where that starts, kind of where that red intersects the black. I'm going to draw a diagonal line, so my projection line, back to the vanishing point. And then I'm going to do that again, and I'm going to do that for each line that I have down here. And we're just focusing on the bottom right now, just the bottom part of the floor. So I'm going to keep going across. Like that. Each one is hitting directly on top of that vanishing point. Making sure they're all the same distance apart. You don't want to have these be different distances in between, because that'll again mess up what your floor is going to look like, so, or what your grid's going to look like. So just make sure that it's an inch across. You could do a half inch, quarter of an inch. I wouldn't suggest doing a quarter of an inch, but just make sure it's the same distance. So inch, 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 inch. Okay. So that's the first part to this. I have my projection lines from each inch segment that go directly back to that vanishing point. Alright, so I still have my vanishing point. I have not gotten rid of my vanishing point. Okay, so we're going to get back to the bottom part of the floor here. And this is where the trick kind of comes into play. And this is where it can get even more confusing. So again, just watch exactly what I'm doing, and I want you to copy exactly the same way. Okay, so I'm going to start with this back bottom left corner. Start here, and then we're going to drag a diagonal line that goes all the way across and then ends in this front right corner. Okay, so this is front right, back left. Okay, and that's the first step to creating our grid. So then the next thing that I'm going to do is line up. So you're going to have your rulers, and you're going to line up exactly where this diagonal line intersects that projection line. Okay, so right here, right where that's lighting up. Okay, and I'm going to draw a horizontal line all the way across, and then across this way, until I meet the left and the right wall. Okay, so that's our first line. And then I'm going to do that again. I'm going to draw a horizontal line all the way over to the left wall, and then continue that line all the way over to the right wall. This will be easier for you since you'll be using a ruler or a straight edge, so you don't have to do this fun Microsoft Word magic. Okay, so I've done this one right here as well as this one. And then I'm going to move on to the next intersection. So you're just working your way across until you reach the back. So what you'll see, hopefully what you'll notice, is that these squares at the very front, so closest to you, are larger, and then as they start to get further back, so they're receding further away, closer to the vanishing point, they will get smaller. Okay, so that's the whole principle, the idea of linear perspective, is that we're drawing things to make them look three-dimensional. Okay, so that's how we do this. So for the next part here, you can do the same thing as we did on the floor. So I'm just dragging these projection lines back to the vanishing point. I'm lining them up with the inches that I marked out before, so my little tick marks. Dragging them straight back, all the way back, and this one as well. Okay, and then from here, what do I need to do? I need to erase the things that I do not need, those extra lines. So just do this. Okay, and theoretically, I would want you guys to erase this diagonal as well. I won't do that because that'll take me a really long time, but you want that line to be very, very light so you don't have it interfering with the rest of your grid system. Now that I've done this first part here with the diagonal line, it's going to be a lot easier to complete the grid everywhere else because we already have the placement of these lines. So what I'm going to do is start with the first one, and you can start from the back if you want. I always just go from the front. I don't know why. So I'm going to draw in my vertical line this time. Okay, and it's really nice and straight. So these two lines should be completely perpendicular to each other. So you should see that 90-degree angle happening at their corner where they intersect. And I'm going to keep going all the way back. So now we're on this one here. And this is where you have to make sure that you are lined up correctly. Because even if you start, like let's say you missed it a little bit and you started your line back there, do you see how this distance is bigger than the one in front of it? You don't want that to happen because that'll, again, it'll mess up your perspective. So just make sure it's lined up as best as you possibly can. Just like that. And on to this one. Okay, and I can see that one was off by just a tiny bit. So it's really good to revise. Always double check your lines. Look at them, make sure that they are accurate. And if they're not accurate, I want you to erase it and make it accurate. That'll really help out down the line because I would hate for you to start this grid and have your lines incorrect and then have to restart everything. Okay, so just paying really close attention to what it is that you're doing. All right, so from here, you can kind of see that you can just start and go all the way around. And it's okay to take breaks from this. There's a lot of lines going on, and sometimes the lines can kind of trick your brain into looking like opposite. So if you need to just stand up, stretch, you know, get a drink of water, anything like that, go ahead and do that, so you're not straining your eyes. Okay, so I've got my horizontal lines along the ceiling now, and this is where you take a deep breath and fingers crossed that your lines are accurate and you've done everything correctly. Because if they don't line up here, this is where you're going to be like, oh shoot, I'm going to have to start over. Okay, so lining this up as best as I can. Come on. There you go. Drawing that down. And it should, ooh, yeah. See how that connects perfectly to that horizontal line down here? That tells me that I have done this amazingly. Like, I did this as accurate as I possibly could. And then I will just keep on going. If any one of these horizontal lines is off, you'll start seeing stuff kind of happen that looks like this. Just crazy lines. And you'll be wondering why it looks so weird. And it's because your measurements are off or your lines aren't perfectly straight. So now we have all of our horizontal and our vertical lines completed. And then from here, we just need to finish putting in those projection lines or diagonal lines that go back to the vanishing point. And I'm just going to reference my little ruler above. Alright, so here is our grid system in 1-point perspective. Alright, so I've cleaned up my border a little bit just to make it look nicer, and I magically went in and erased that diagonal line. So you can clearly see the grid system here in linear perspective and my vanishing point. I'm just going to mark that in because we don't want to forget about our vanishing point. That's really important to always know where it is. Always be VPing. Always be vanishing pointing. Okay, so from here, now that you have your grid system, it's going to be really easy to place in your objects. So let's say, and I'll scooch in a little bit closer here. Let's say I wanted to place in, we'll just go with a cube for now. So what's cool is I already have that bottom plane of my object, whatever that object might be. So what I'll do is I'll kind of pick, maybe I think I want to do this one right here, and I'll fill this in just so you can see which one I'm working with. So I'm going to choose that one. Go back to my red lines, and then I'm going to start at the bottom left corner. We'll make this kind of a taller cube, and then go down to my right corner, draw my line up until it reaches this one, and then I will complete the top of my rectangle. Okay, so really I'm just drawing that front face of the rectangle here, and then I'm going to go from this corner back to the vanishing point, from the right corner back to the vanishing point, and I already have these ones done so I don't have to worry about that. Then I'll look at the back left corner of this, draw it up until I hit that top projection line, do the same thing over here, draw it up until I hit that line, And then I'm going to complete the cube by drawing a horizontal line across. And we can see that that was a little bit too low. So again, I'm double checking. I'm making sure that my lines are intersecting where they should be. They're parallel where they need to be, right? Horizontal or vertical. Okay? And then I will go in and erase those friends that we don't need anymore. We're on to bigger and better things. We don't need them anymore. Okay, but I still have my vanishing point there. So that's a really cool, really quick way to start adding in your objects. Let's fill this in just for fun. You can see how it really starts to take on that three-dimensional form now. Let's do this color in the back. Oops. Okay, so we're seeing our cube there, and then I will edit out those grid lines. So this is where you would be erasing out your 2H pencil lines, your very, very lightly drawn pencil lines. So you don't have any of those construction lines showing through your object. All right, so by magical movie editing, I've erased my construction lines and I have a beautiful three-dimensional rectangular form in my grid system. Okay, so it's really cool because you can also imagine that if I were to select, you know, this up here, it's a little bit closer, that rectangle would end up being larger, right? And that's one of the ideas with linear perspective and the concept of relative size, is that as things get closer to you, they'll be larger, right? So this object that's closest to us, or this square, is larger than the one that's back here. And as things start to get further away or closer to the vanishing point, they get smaller. Okay, so that's the concept of relative size. Things in the front are larger, things that get closer to the vanishing point are smaller. Okay, and then another thing that goes hand in hand with relative size is overlapping. So obviously if I had a rectangle shape that was in front of this one, right, I would know that it's closer to me because it's larger. This one's obviously further away because it has something that's overlapping or obscuring it from the front. Okay, so let's draw another shape just for fun, and we'll do a pyramid this time, and I want to do a real big one. You can pretend like this is Animal Crossing, and I've got some pyramids that I want to put in my house, or maybe I'm visiting Anka's house, seeing her pyramid. So remember, with pyramids, to find the center, we want to do our magic X. That is impossible to see. There we go. X. So there's my center line right here. Then I'm going to draw my vertical line straight up from that center point, and then I will connect from the top of this down to the four corners. Like so. Okay, and because I'm drawing this as if it were opaque, we're not going to actually see this back line right there, so I don't even need to bother putting that in. Okay, so I'll go ahead and fill this in so it looks like this one, and then we'll do a couple more things. Alright, so there is our pyramid drawn in the grid system in our room using 1-point perspective. So I'll show you just a couple more things, and then I'll let you move on with this project and hopefully start working on your own grid system. So one thing I want to cover is how to draw in like doors and windows, making sure that they're in perspective. So, and it's really nice again to have this grid system because those vertical and projection lines are already there for us. So what I'll do, say I just want a door over here. Maybe I want it to be this tall. I'll just fill that in, right? And then I would just, you know, re-outline that, and I'll do it a little bit thicker too so it's easier to see. So my vertical lines, and then I have my projection line, right? So that should be diagonal and it should be going towards that vanishing point. Okay. If I zoom out, I've got a nice little door. If I wanted to, you know, maybe have this as a hallway, I could extend this line out like that. So I'd make the corner of the wall and a little entrance there. Let's say I wanted to do a window on this side. So I'll just pick how big I want my window to be. Maybe we'll do a real wide window like this. And then back to this here, just outlining those lines that I already have done on the grid system. Putting in my projection lines. Just like that. Okay, so something else, again, that I want you to be thinking about is having thickness, or, you know, some sort of substantial weight or width to the things that you're drawing. So with the case of this window, you know, I might want to show maybe there's like a little bit of a cutout or something like that. So by doing that, you know, it's kind of like a reverse rectangle, right? So I'm drawing my horizontal lines to the right, my vertical line that goes down to meet those, and then what I'll need to do, try and do this lightly here, is draw out my vanishing point that goes through that line right there. So I have that one, and then I also have this one, like that, and I'll jump back to the black, and then just, oops, make that thicker, just fill it out. This is kind of like a little window ledge, or like a bay window or something like that. Let's make these a little bit thicker. Okay, so that would be more of a three-dimensional substantial window to have. So you can see how it looks like it just kind of jets out a little bit. And then maybe I want to do some sort of light fixtures on my ceiling. So to keep it really simple, you could do kind of like when you're building your cones or your cylinder, just doing little ellipses that fit into kind of the width and dimensions of that square, right? And you can kind of see as I fit in those little ovals in each square, you'll see they start to get smaller and smaller and smaller and squattier as they get further away. Okay, so that's kind of a cool way to do light fixtures if you wanted to. You could get really fancy and have some things like hang down. Maybe I've got, let's do this one over here. So it doesn't get too confusing. We got that there. That white. I'm gonna make that smaller. That. And maybe I want this to be like a real chunky hanging light. So that would be the top of my cylinder essentially, right, as it connects into the ceiling. And then I want to draw in another kind of cylindrical form like this. And then I could do another line there, and then erase the lines that I don't need anymore. Okay, I was saying bye to Mr. Peterson, so I kind of forgot what I was talking about. But so here's a little hanging light fixture. I could get even more fancy and throw in a little light bulb there, which means I need to redo this line. Yep. And I'll erase that piece of the bulb that I don't want shown through. Okay, so it's kind of a fun way that you can get really creative with putting your forms together, adding them together to create some different things. One last thing that I want to point out, and I've seen this happen lots of times, is just to watch out and make sure that you're placing things in the grid correctly. So I've seen a lot of people that will, let me grab this out, they'll start to draw like a cabinet or an island counter or something like that, and they'll start it at the back of the room, and then they'll start drawing in those vanishing points like that. And you know, sometimes they're not perfect. Okay, so this would be just a really poor example of incorrectly drawing in perspective. So the problem with this is that it's technically going through that back wall, right? So unless I extended my floor out even further, it really wouldn't make any sense, right? So just make sure, if you want to start something back here, instead of, you know, going that way, you'll just reverse it and you'll go outwards. So I think that should be it. I might keep adding on to this for a little bit more, and then I'll just post the picture at the end. Hopefully you have fun with this. If you get lost or you get confused, just watch the video and follow my steps. And if you need any extra help, just let me know. All right, that's it.